Hey folks, MasakoX here. This was a good year for Piccolo, wasn't it? I think we can all safely say that 2022 has been a very positive time of it for the Namekian, at a time where we weren't quite sure what the future held for this particular character. It's all actually been coming up roses for Piccolo. Think about it. The dude's got his own movie, a new transformation, technically 2 transformations, as well as some adoration from Shenron. I mean, yeah, you could easily describe that adoration as being biased, since the guy who made Shenron in the first place is nestled deeply within Piccolo's head. Nevertheless, this is the first time we've seen the dragon being that proactive with a wish, and I can't stress this enough. Piccolo was the main focus of Dragon Ball Super superhero. Gohan was a relative afterthought, Toriyama having to be effectively prompted to include Gohan in the movie from other team members within the movie production committee, including Akio Iyoku, his go-to second in command nowadays for Dragon Ball content outside of Toriyama. Now I bet that some of you are thinking that Piccolo getting a movie of his own isn't right, that it should always be Saiyans in charge of proceedings, that's all that people care about. Any other character can't possibly carry a feature-length story, but honestly, no, Piccolo's a good candidate for such a thing. And it shouldn't be weird to anyone really who's been following Dragon Ball for a decent amount of time, because Toriyama likes to cite the Big Green himself as being one of his favourite characters from the franchise. In fact, the favourite, depending on his mood, because yes, we've seen multiple sources over the years where he sometimes says that Goku's his favourite character, but Piccolo is indeed his favourite, the most consistent favourite, since he sees a lot of himself in the Namekian's personality. So let's talk a bit about Piccolo, now that we've seen Superhero, and that the world has finally processed the events of the movie for themselves. We wish to discuss his current role in the series and what he means to the franchise as a whole now. We spoke about him being an also-ran character in the past, unlikely to get back to the glory days of Z before the Buu saga, but now we think that is very much behind him. That period of malaise is done, and instead we can easily see Piccolo being right back to where he was, as the best of the rest. At worst. By a considerable margin, in fact. And when you take age into the equation, Piccolo is probably the most useful and crucial member of the Dragon team going. And it all started from very sinister beginnings. Goku had quite a few rivals before Big Green came along in the original Dragon Ball series, Tenshinhan being the most obvious example, the first that pops into your head. He still kinda has a yardstick kind of thing going on with Goku to this day. But Krillin is also someone who could maybe fit that bill, especially before Dragon Ball Z kicked into high gear. But Piccolo Jr., he outclassed all of them considerably when it comes to his rivalry with the Saiyan. He was the first one out of all of them to really want to kill Goku, like no joke. You could argue that maybe Mercenary Tao wanted to kill Goku back in the day, but when you boil it down, he was being paid to do it. That was his primary goal. But with the son of King Piccolo, that was all him. He personally wanted to see Goku wiped off the face of the earth in the name of vengeance for his father. That's quite a big thing to process in that period of Dragon Ball. It was quite serious. Arguably, he seemed to be the most evil out of all of the previous enemies that Goku had had to face. He was effectively Vegeta 1.0. King Piccolo had been the effective template of all subsequent Dragon Ball Z villains going in terms of the big bad, but Piccolo Jr. was the first example of what would then go on to be Vegeta. Give Goku that first constant barometer of a rival in which to improve against, and there was a lot of peril combined with it too. With Tenshinhan and Krillin, they eventually became friends and there was a friendliness to it, but Piccolo for a long time, there was a bit of danger mixed in with that relationship. He was a rival that was built on more than healthy competition. Piccolo was out for his head, and Goku was more than happy to bite and have a good fight. The prince was, but at the moment, a twinkle in Toriyama's eye. And it is kind of ironic, actually, that the Saiyans were then the ones to motivate Piccolo into becoming a better person. Albeit indirectly. Regardless, his redemption arc is a less tedious task than that of Vegeta's, when it was his then turn to join the good guys. And right before the arrival of Kamiccolo in the Android/Cell saga, Piccolo is the one to prioritize the safety of the planet before their feud, proving to the older half that, at the end of the day, he had outgrown the simple evil half status. And I think that scene where he and Kami are locking eyes at each other, is quite powerful. Kami had been expecting, despite being able to read Piccolo's mind, a battle of wills that would eclipse everything that was going down on the planet. But instead, what he actually got was a very mature and pragmatic soul who yearned for a solution. He was asking Kami for help whilst also dealing with his own internal struggle. Kami had to bow down to Piccolo's maturity, with the partial help of Nail in a way. As we have mentioned many times in countless discussions before now, Piccolo had already fully redeemed himself at this point in the story, at the time of the Android saga, and in a way one could argue that it maybe have happened sooner, with his original sacrifice in the Saiyan saga. That's when he became a good guy, in a way. But I feel that he had plenty more road to walk down before we could really bestow the title of good guy upon him. That road ending at that moment with Kami. He was the one acting selfishly instead of Piccolo. Yes, he was the guardian of Earth, and Piccolo had then just showed him up as not being fit at that moment to be said guardian. He was too set in his ways of, oh no, I have to observe, I can't do anything physically, and Piccolo saying, yeah, bull. But Piccolo made him admit that he was actually wrong, and instead he would then go on to do what he could. We mentioned Tenshinhan a moment ago, and much like the Triclops, after the Cell saga, Piccolo's role in direct battling with the baddies wasn't really that big. But he was always there to motivate the likes of Gohan, Vegeta, and Gotenks. His capacity as a well of information, now with Kami locked away in his mind, was not something to ignore. And he was no stranger in teaching either, as his general attitude became more classically heroic than Goku's. You could easily describe Piccolo in the Buu saga as more of a superhero than Goku was. Yes, I know, the dub did amp up Goku's heroic attitude, but when you take that skewing out of the equation, Piccolo is the more heroic of the two. He was also the one to never give up on Gohan's strength, at all. Even when most of the Dragon team, led by Vegeta, had branded the son of Goku as really not fit for purpose, not wanting to fight on the front line anymore, not really counting on Gohan's power post-Cell. Something that is very apparent during the preparations for the Tournament of Power, as well as part of Superhero, because in the tournament, they mainly viewed Gohan for his strategic mind rather than his fighting hands. And yes, I kind of wish that we got something different for Gohan going forward in that arc instead of yet another simplification of, oh, he has the lack of will to fight, and then he suddenly acquires it again only to then lose it again. But at least this time, it was for more valiant reasons, wanting to protect Pan, but there is more to that as well, and Piccolo has something to do with it. The superhero movie was kinda gigantic for him, and he was gigantic as well, as he was allowed to take initiative. Instead of just waiting for Goku or running off to warn somebody, he actually went and, checked it out for himself. He saved the world by alerting the others about their return when he had concrete information about it, and then preventing a fully developed Cell Max from existing, because you know that Magenta would have activated him regardless of Hedo's wishes eventually. It was his fetishistic yearning to do so. Piccolo was also convinced that he also needed to help Gohan realize his potential again. At least this time though, it was done differently, more aggressively. And he actually called Gohan out many times for his faults, including the guilt trip of abandoning his own daughter. A side note, by the way, the double act of Pan and Piccolo in this movie, oh, I'm so relieved that Pan was in on this whole plan the entire time. Now, one of the criticisms of the movie is connected to the fact that Gohan, he should have been allowed to choose whatever he wanted to do. No one should have really held him back. If he wanted to be a family man, scholar type of thing, that was his call. And while we agree with this notion to a degree, no pun intended, the brilliance of what Piccolo does is that it shows that Gohan has been kind of using this whole thing as an excuse just to do what he wanted, which was research. It showed the nerd up. He isn't that bothered with his struggle, really. It's just a tool to get out of training. He's too absorbed in his studies. And if Piccolo hadn't intervened and brought him to task about this and make him finally realized that he really needed to actually think of his family and what he was supposed to do, call him out, this could have led to a very unhappy marriage, I reckon, where Videl was all alone and Pan had an absent father, maybe even divorce. Gohan's a passive person. He probably wouldn't have fought for the marriage. If Videl said she was unhappy, Gohan would probably have been like, okay then, I understand. I won't fight you. So Big Green had to just come in there and slap some sense into him the only way he knew how. There you go. Piccolo's also a marriage counselor. There is no doubt a parallel to some of Goku's more careless traits as a dad. Not saying that he's a bad dad, I don't want to really get into that debate here, so save it please. And the Namekian is able to see through all of Gohan's rhetoric and finally understand the real cause of Gohan's apathy, as Gohan easily could commit to either his family and training, but he chose not to, despite claiming that he would have to choose one or the other. Turns out he really didn't have to. He was hiding behind a curtain. And Piccolo knows him enough that he wants to show him up that he can actually manage both quite easily. It didn't have to be Gohan's choice alone either. For years we were thinking what Piccolo's role actually was in his relationship with Gohan's family. Was it just for comedic yucks? Was he just a babysitter, or was he more than that? But then this goes beyond the family dynamic and now toward the general overview of his place in the Dragon Team. Was he a supporting character? For sure. But now he can call himself as not just a supporting character anymore. And we have some sense of that being the case. Luckily, it seems that he, Krillin and Android 18 won't be falling out of this role anytime soon. Although we must admit in this movie, 18's role is quite clearly the least effective. And Krillin did a lot in this movie too, despite his cop garb. But while Krillin is Goku's #1 pal, Piccolo's role is more unique. He is part of the Son family, safely to say. Again, if Dragon Ball had the capacity for godfathers, he would have been Gohan's and probably Pan's too. But see, the uniqueness of his role is that Piccolo is not just a supporting feature. No. His job for all of these years has been to motivate people, or be around those who could become the best versions of themselves if they just believed in themselves. Piccolo isn't afraid to draw people up for their shortcomings either, make them look at themselves long and hard, and discover where they had been lacking, and then what to do about it to change things for the better. He did that for Kami, he's mostly done it for Vegeta, he's doing that for Gohan and has been doing so for years now, and now he's doing it for Pan. And look what that managed to achieve in just one movie. He was even the one to point out problems with Goku's plans during the Cell Saga. While Krillin is a cheerleader sort of friend, Piccolo's that friend that will challenge you. He's the devil's advocate, ironically given his lineage. He is ultimately the one that will help you grow though. He will grow together with you, so you can be the best, and in turn, he can be there for you. And while ultimately Superhero has the Gohan boost big moment thing, it's all thanks to Piccolo and Pan that it even happened. And Piccolo's okay with that. He's not a showy person, he's not there for the glory. He's just relieved that he can still fight and contribute to proceedings and help people out. He started off as a slightly less evil copy of his father, who just wanted to rule the world and evolved actually into someone who wanted his friends to have the spotlight. Instead of yearning for the spotlight himself, he wanted it for other people, to realize themselves and be happy. Seeing his everyday routines, how close he is with Gohan's family, that was such a neat element of world building too. There's that little moment in the dub with Pan's kindergarten teacher called Janet, which I want to address next. And it's very different to the original. Sabat kinda explained the difference between the two in an interview he did for Entertainment Weekly, and it turns out that a lot of things that the dub did in this one were against Toei's wishes, for the sake of the English dub's history. It became very clear that Piccolo is a big part of their family. I may have leaned on this as a father, I may have leaned on this even harder than Japan did, but I love the idea that they asked Piccolo to pick up Pan more than Piccolo wanted to. I got the impression that he does this all the time, so there's a moment when Piccolo apologizes to Pan's teacher. In the Japanese script it says, "Sorry about this, ma'am. We did. Sorry about this, Janet." I thought Piccolo knowing Pan's teacher on a first name basis implies for the audience that he does this all the time. So while this is something translated on a cultural level, it's very fitting, though the internet kinda got crazy with shipping the two. But this is the way of the internet, I guess. I do wonder actually if Japan will actually notice this change in this pairing going forward. Is this the last we see of Janet? We always view Piccolo as an asexual being, but he also had an Earth upbringing, so who knows? The sole fact that so much fan after this pairing exists may mean that we finally start to see Piccolo not just as this gruff, homeless, mystic being, but maybe as a character who has his own life and goals in said life. And that's cool. Fighting is all well and good, but world building and slice of life are the things that build stakes for the stories overall. And it really helps prevent the general shebang from getting stale. Characters being afraid of losing stuff that they care about or not being able to make their loved ones happy. That's the stuff that keeps people interested in the long run. Fights are pretty to look at in the moment, but once the fight's done, there is very little left to keep your mind ticking over. With world building, oh, there's so much to think about outside of the story. While in Dragon Ball the stakes can be drastically low, it's famous for it, Superhero managed to handle that pretty well. were setting some real danger out for the characters. It gave us a meaningful and lasting death, consequences, but also showing that there is more to Piccolo and Gohan's life than just fighting, and that we can break with tradition, such as Vegeta defeating Goku in the duel when all things were equal. Yes, it was a training scene, yes, but in a slice of lifey sort of way, you know? We even see Beerus being kinda lemma when he didn't have to be. We did a discussion about this a while back for the full context, by the way. I think this is why we actually love the movie so much in a way, because after so many years of nagging about the story, 5 years of Hav and I doing this, we have a movie that is not afraid to move these characters forward, break the iconography. And it helped Piccolo immensely, because after seeing him doing so well in a solo mission situation, we now know that his glory days are not behind him. Goku and Vegeta may be iconic designs, but we assure you, the second most iconic design from this entire franchise is this guy. And we are glad that the higher-ups are finally allowing him to be the hero that he deserved to be. We'll see you in the next video. Catch you later!